Welcome back, guys.
All right.
It's winter.
And
Welcome back.
Brad,
Showing your
I was
age.
with my brother and we were talking about that. You know, Vinny Barbarino. Remember? That was John Travolta.
yeah, I know.
It's so
Great.
weird. It's like, come on. Yeah. I forgot about that show. They're supposed to be high schoolers, but I think they're actually like 26 or 27
at the
year
time.
old actors.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember that show.
You
Welcome
know?
back, Carter.
Oh, well, I forgot.
It's a bunch of, it's a you would like it actually. You should go back and watch it. It's a New York high school that's what in the is it in the Bronx? Or
I think
is
that
it,
was John Travolta's first role.
Probably
yeah,
sit there.
and it's just a bunch of
What's it called?
Welcome back, Carter.
Welcome back, Cotter. So the
I've heard
teacher,
of it.
his
I've heard
name,
of it.
his last name is Cotter, I guess. And so he was kind of like a mentor for these guys,
Yeah.
these youth on the, they're kind of
Like
dealing
street
with
kids,
the youth on the street.
kids,
And they all,
New York.
he definitely, was able to relate to him and stuff, and kind of
If there was a
help
way to
him through
watch it, I
life.
would.
YouTube.
YouTube.
I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, everything's on YouTube.
I go back and watch old Johnny Carson stuff. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's old school, man.
I know.
Really old school.
Really old school. I like Johnny. He'd always
Really,
put his finger right there. You can't see it, but
What was the guy? What was his
that
role?
is weird, wild stuff.
He would put the magician hat on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Trendsetter OG, man.
That is weird. That's wild. Always put his finger right there.
Speaking of weird and wild, can you guys believe it's the end of 2022?
I cannot believe it.
I know,
It's
man.
almost
It's gone so
2023.
fast. It always goes fast. It actually went faster this year somehow. Somehow that happened.
I know, man.
Well,
And
well,
in
interesting times.
yeah,
How'd
now,
you guys do? I know we're not talking about that, but how business better or worse than 2021, 2020?
It was just different.
Well,
for
better
me.
or worse is a bad one. What
I wouldn't say
how was it?
worse. I would just say
Hopefully not worse.
our revenues are down a bit. Definitely feeling a little bit of the pinch going on,
squeeze.
the squeeze with the inflation. And I think the challenge is it's not just the revenues, but it's the cost. Our cost has gone up, and I think just in general, like our own household cost has gone up. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty considerably. So we've had to kind of look at that a little bit. My wife and I kind of talk through a little bit, maybe just make some changes. Going out to eat is really expensive. It's
Man,
amazing.
it's crazy, isn't it? It's like
It's
double.
amazing. Double. Yeah, it is definitely double. And then on top of it, when you add a tip and stuff, next thing you know, it's, just what used to be maybe a $12 meal now is $20 for each person. And it's definitely changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, costs have definitely gone up. I've noticed that a lot. I mean, I think we even talked about it once. I mean, I think in 1 week in the middle of summer, everyone asked for a raise.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing.
It is real.
It's a real it's not.
Well, I think human resource costs have definitely gone up. And
Yes.
to me, in running a business, more than, everyone's costs have gone up, but no, you're not even insulated from it if you don't have humans
Yeah.
and you're doing other things, because obviously all costs have gone up. But I think that has been the biggest difference this year. But I wouldn't say it was a bad year.
It wasn't a bad year for us. Our clients were very happy, and we did some really good stuff. I think it's for us, we just didn't put as much energy into new business as we normally have in the past, and so
We saw some really exciting things actually happening, and so it's actually been from a standpoint of business energy and inspiration. It's been a really good year, and I don't know. I feel really good. I mean, anytime that there's two sides of any sort of downturn, and anytime that there's a downturn, there's also a massive
Opportunities,
opportunity.
yeah.
And I'm so excited about that.
well, I'm right now just gearing up for my word next year. I'm trying to.
Well, I'll tell you
I'm
what,
gonna have
man.
a good one.
You lived it out better than
Really? Yeah.
Anyone I know.
Did you have a lot of fun this year?
Yeah, my word was more. If you didn't haven't been listening to the podcast, my word for this year was more fun. Not just fun, but more fun. Yeah, I think not as much as I probably could have, but I definitely more.
There were several times where I said,
Hey,
we're
more.
recording today, and you said, no, I'm having more fun.
More fun.
Skiing, or snowboarding, or wakeboard. I don't know, biking.
Yeah,
I don't think you said any of those.
Going on
things.
some trips.
Definitely biking.
Going on some trips.
going on some trips and just trying to take advantage of things.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap up the book discussions. Thanks, guys, for for indulging me, but also
No, I think they were
participating
really cool.
in my book project stuff.
Yes.
So I think today we'll kind of round it down by talking about what it takes to write a book and whether that's a good idea and how it may have helped me over the years and other people and you guys. And so where do you guys want to begin on that?
Well, I would just say, like, I think on the topic of writing a book, I would say a lot of people want to write a book or say they want to write a book, maybe have aspirations or maybe dreams of writing a book, meaning they maybe don't believe it's going to happen. But that idea of writing a book, I would say, is kind of up there with recording a record or, achieving certain types of things in life. And I think a lot of people dream to do that and have maybe even practical dreams to do that, especially in our industry. But there seem to be a lot of barriers to it. And so you've written 4 now, right?
The thought of writing a book to me is very daunting.
Yeah, so I would love to break down some myths of writing a book.
Yeah,
and
maybe it's just all myths in my head of like,
yeah,
it just seems daunting to me. Like the time that it would take to invest in it would be difficult, but I don't know if it is or not. In fact, most of the people that I know that have written books would never ever call themselves an author initially. They never said, "Hey, I'm a writer. That's what I do."
correct.
There are people that do other things, but then find time and energy to produce a book, probably mostly because they have expertise in it and they just want to continue to share that. But so, Bob, first of all, I'd like to get to the heart of like your motivation for book writing.
I was going to ask the exact same
Really?
question. I was like, let's start with why you wrote your first book.
Like the
Why did you
first
ever do
one
it?
versus now, because I'm sure the motivation might be different.
Yeah. I have always built my business and marketing on the back of content. I don't know if I just came up with that or if it's been intuitive to me, but I can't tell you. But there was a moment in time 20 years ago that I said, I think if I put together a good content strategy, I'll rank high and then I'll get business. That wasn't intentional, but I began to realize that was what was happening. So I've always been somebody who communicates. I've loved to communicate, and I think it's why I got in this business, but I also love to write, and I've always had a knack for it. So to your point, I don't know that I've always seen myself as an author, but if you're going to write and you're going to write a book, then you have to write. So everybody's a writer to some degree.
When you were back in grade school, did you like writing and reading, or did you hate it?
Looking back now, because hindsight's 2020, I realize, and as I think about it, and as I look at things, that was probably what I was best at. At the time, I didn't go, "Oh, I love this, and I'm going to sit down and read 10 books this week, or I'm going to write." But I had a knack for it.
So you did enjoy it?
Yeah, it was not. I hated math.
It wasn't work for you.
I didn't really care about science so much.
Right.
But if you want to communicate and write a story, or dream or imagination around a book, or any of that more arts related, that was more my leaning.
Because I would say for a lot of people, they don't enjoy that process.
Right.
And that probably becomes one of the main barriers is the how. And and so the strategy is probably putting the why in front of the how.
Yeah.
For sure. Why would you write a book and really do it? But I would love to maybe in a second get into practically how and how you get over those type of things. But I just think that's a barrier for a lot of people. So the first time you wrote a book, you didn't I was around you at the time that you wrote your first book.
Right.
What made you do it?
I think I have a lot to say, and that's probably in my own mind, but if I don't get it out in some way, it's not that I have to get it out. It just comes out of me. So I think you have to sit down and ask yourself, why do you want to write a book? And we've all worked with authors, and strategically from a marketing perspective, there's dozens of reasons to write a book. It's not just I'm a creative person or I'm a writer, and so I'm going to write a book and make a living out of it. That's one of many. as we know, and most people know, it can be a great lead gen tool. And if that's your only motivation, that's a great motivation, and that's okay. But all of these, or you want an extra side income, or you want a platform that you feel very passionate about, and this might give it to you, or you have dreams of being a New York Times bestseller. Those are all different reasons and motivations. And I would say, leaning into your next question, those are different ways to produce or create that type of content. Depending on what your reasoning for writing is, also should be drive how it's done. Because there are so many ways, Brad, you're talking about, it's daunting. There are really simple ways to create a book and content. But it depends on your reason. Like if you want to be a New York Times bestseller and you have something really important to say that comes from your heart, there's a different way to write that book than there is to be a lead gen tool, right? You don't even have to write the book yourself to be a lead gen tool or business. You don't, you could just talk to someone and go, this is what I want. These are the main topics, and they'll write it for you and slap your name on it. And there's your lead gen tool.
So did you write your first book as a marketing tool for your business to create authority? Or was it just that you felt like you really had something that you wanted to give back to the community, because that you're writing for, and what was your main focus, do you think?
I wrote a book back in 2009, 2008.
Which one
10,
was that?
Called The Recommendation Age. I also wrote one around the same time with a co-author called Faith-Based Marketing. And The Recommendation Age was my experience up until the time in the digital world, and it was more of a industry how to, what was happening in social media at the time was just starting to take off. And I was teaching at a university, social media marketing to MBA students at the time. I was building my business at the height of where it was. And so for me, I think the motivation was certainly thought leadership. And so that's a lot of my drive, is thinking deeply about things and having a voice in the environments that I find myself in my career.
And I was just going to say that as I break this down, right? So, I imagine when you've written your books, like you've got a bunch of ideas. How have you decided on like the topic to say, okay, this is the thing that I think is going to be, because, I would say for me, oftentimes, I've got a few book ideas and I would love to write them. And I do a lot of writing. One of the challenges is you look at the landscape and you say, okay, is there an opening for something unique to say or not? Now, I think I think that's probably a fallacy, because there probably isn't, and you just that shouldn't stop you, I would imagine, in most spaces, and it's actually a good thing, as we know in marketing, because the more people that are there, that means there's actually a market for it. But what was your process like in just deciding your topics and what you're going to write about?
Whether it's a fallacy or not, I do think there are opportunities to look at things from a different angle than a lot of people look at. Having said that, chances are you're not the only one that's looking at it from that angle. So what I try to do is find those things that there's not a lot of competition of other books, but also my test is always, when you talk to people about it, does it resonate? Do their eyes light up and say, oh, I've never thought about it that way? Those are the things that I gravitate to. If I test it and throw it out there in the water and it's not, people aren't responding that way, I usually move on and go, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't such a great idea. But if there's some sort of resonance, whatever it may be, then I kind of start to dig a little deeper there and say, okay, there might be something here. For my recent book, talking about the effects of digital media on the human psychology, et cetera, that's not an original idea, but the way we approached that was talking about media trauma and how And I think that's kind of original thinking, from like that media can actually influence us in ways that can be long lasting and actually very impactful, deeper than just I got bullied or I'm addicted to my phone or these things. It's like going under the cover a little bit deeper. So that's kind of my approach. But to your point, I don't think that there's one way to write a book. And if there's anything that I would say in this episode and people walk away with, it's the age-old advice. If you're going to write a book, just write every day. Just say, this is part of my everyday thing that I do, because you do 2 or 3 things every day that you're in a habit of. Whatever it may be, you might run, you might lift weights, you might...
Yeah. No, you're right.
It's just sit down and write. Start with a paragraph.
And do you write, when you've written your books, are you writing those books every day, or are you just writing every day?
I'm just writing every day, period.
Yeah, okay.
So I keep a notepad with a pen, plus I keep my notes on my phone. And if I'm out walking and listening to something, or I'm thinking, I will stop, put the podcast on hold, or I'll stop my whatever I'm doing, and I'll just put it on there. Like I just have a running notes. If you see my notes on my iPhone, my note apps, it's years and years of pages of just random thoughts. Because I think when the idea comes to you, we might get a little metaphysical here, but I think a good idea comes to you. It has power. It has an essence to it, and it's something that is stronger than just yourself, because that's how the world changes and moves forward. It starts with ideas. It starts with dreams. It starts with thoughts. And I think if you don't do something with it, if it's a powerful idea, someone else will. It has the power to work itself out in the world. So I really believe that. So I write these things down because I want to catch them. I want to come back to them. I want to ruminate on them. And then if it's worthy of a blog post, I'll write a blog post if it's worthy. And sometimes it falls flat, but sometimes it resonates. And then I think over time, you're like, okay, this could go somewhere. There could be more exposition around it.
So when you get these ideas, do you... the books you've written, there's other books around the topics, obviously, but
of course
you come with a different angle. Do you does those angles that come out of ruminating on an idea, like do you sit down and go, okay, what is my unique take on this that I maybe hasn't been shared yet in a book? And do you do any research? Do you understand what's out there and how your material is different? What does that process look like? Like, how do you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is the story we're going to be telling, which is unique. Like the recent book, it's unique because of A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. How do you get there?
Definitely research. That to me, we live in a day and age where you can't get away with just opinions. And I think in the environment we live in, you've got to document. Like, you can't just say this is true because everybody says, and unless your book is more of a personal memoir or opinion or experience, I think you got to start with the research and say, okay, if I'm going to write a book on this, what's going to be my sources? What angle am I going to come from? I've been fortunate enough for 2 of the 4 books to co-write with co-authors. 2 I wrote on my own, 2 and that's a great process. If you're like, I don't know if I want to write a book on myself, then partner up with somebody. And, you say, I'll do this part, we'll do this. We'll meet a couple of times a week and we'll write together. We'll research, you take the research, I'll do this. Whatever it may be, that's a great way to write a book too. But to your point, I always like to have some sort of outline, an idea. And then a thread of, okay, where's the research going to come from? Who's this for? And I approach it like I've always done in marketing. Who's the target demographic? Who's the circles? Who's the concentric circle? And who's the bullseye? And then think around building the content and what it says and where the research is coming from. From that, I find that that's helpful. And look, guys, I'm not a most people have never heard of me. Very few people have read my books. But what it does do, and maybe this is a good transition into talking about, it gives you a sense of authority, a platform, and ultimately a wedge to get in doors that you may not have got in before.
Well, it's funny here in Franklin. Anyone who's been to Franklin kind of knows Franklin, or anyone who lives here knows how tight and small it is.
Yeah.
Can't be talking about people around behind their back because they might be right next to you.
Yeah.
But someone that works for me was in a coffee shop at the front and looked down and saw your new book. This was after our last podcast recording.
Funny.
And he said, "Oh, Our Digital Soul, I need to read that book. That looks really cool." Looked down and further said, "Oh, Bob Hutchins." And then looked over and Bob Hutchins is right there talking to somebody else. He didn't say hi to you. And so maybe you're definitely more famous than you think.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Definitely in Franklin.
Yeah, in our little community, I could drop 5 books and everybody would see it.
So let me ask you a little bit. Again, we can talk about other things, and then there's a lot more to talk about. But because I want to get into a little bit more of the nuts and the bolts of like the hows. What kind of things does your book allow you to do that you wouldn't have been able to do, like from an authority? I know you do public speaking and things, and you probably do a little. You want to do a little bit more of that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. Is if you like to communicate. A lot of people who write books don't like to speak in public. I enjoy it, so it gives me the opportunity to say, I've written this book. I think it would be a good topic. So podcast, speaking in front of groups, etc. I've done that actually this week. I just did 2 really good speaking engagements here locally. One to a mental health marketing convention, and one at the university to a group of publishers, and different topics. But because and one of the topics wasn't even pertaining to the book, but because I had the books, it gave me the authority to do that. So it does open those doors for sure. I think too, Brad, I think what a book does is it allows you to be a little bit more thoughtful about your engagements with people so that you can lean on the content itself. And that's the cool thing is I've got this stuff documented. So for me, I can go back and I can pull these books off the shelf, and I've forgotten things that I've written, but I can go back and go, oh, I can, it just equips me.
Here's a philosophy that has been successful.
Yeah, here's a philosophy. Here's a way of doing things. Here's if somebody like Bob, come in and consult with us on this. What do you think? It allows me to either give them or leave them something, but also for me to refresh my memory because, if you're like me, you guys are both like, you've done so much, you've had so many clients, we forget half the things we know.
I know.
No, I find myself, it's funny you mentioned that, and I imagine, because I say to myself all the time, I actually say to, and this has been a part of our success, and I even say this to clients, you have to have a formula for success.
Yeah.
Okay. In any business. So, we've all been down to Atlanta, Coca-Cola, like they have a giant vault in the center of the HQ. Inside that vault is the secret formula for Coke, right? At least they say it's great marketing.
Sugar, water,
coloring, corn syrup, red dyed number 40.
High fructose.
And they removed one ingredient, I think, back in the 70s.
Cocaine.
Anyway, my point is you need a formula. If you're in business, like if you have a formula for success, or if you want a business that becomes bigger than you and is doing some more things, you need a formula for success, and you need to document that. My point is I think what often happens is if you're working all the time and very busy executing, you might be reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. And your formulas for success may never get documented. Or if you find one, you may be like, you just don't have time to document it, so you just continue on. We have Alexa playing here, I think, behind me. I think that's what's happening. Alexa, mute.
There you go.
Oh, look at that. Alexa.
Magical. I thought we had a soundtrack going in the background.
Live.
I know.
It's not really live, but it's live.
Well, don't say the S word because she might start talking to you.
She listens to everything we say. She publishes the podcast before we get to it.
Exactly.
So she's probably gonna start playing again soon. My point is documenting that and having the discipline of writing a book, especially if you focus on things that you've become an expert at, or at least success in your world, especially if you run a business in a certain area. That is a forced documentation of those principles.
Yes.
And that is an asset that then you can leverage, which I think is something that I don't think many people would think about. I think that's just a good point that you brought up.
Well, it's also a way to refer back and go, you don't have to rethink and reinvent the wheel, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who wrote a book, but, as difficult as finding time that is, he started out with, he would do blog posts once a week. He would write blog posts. And so he had a couple editors and himself just basically take all of his blog posts and stitch the ideas together into a stronger formulation, and created a really nice book. And uses it a lot for his agency, just as speaker and thought leadership. But I think it also allows his employees to understand his culture, the way he thinks as leader of his business, and the culture and the things. And so, but I thought that was an interesting thing to do. I don't know if it's the best approach to writing a book. Maybe not as intentional as starting from ground zero with a stronger, idea of where the book's going.
I think there's lots of ways, and maybe that's what you want to get into. Is the nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts. One of the first books I wrote, the faith-based marketing book, was a friend of mine who was also in the industry. The way that we did it is we would meet a couple of times a week, and we would mic ourselves up, and we would just have a conversation like, okay, here's the next chapter. Here's what we need to talk about. And we would have a probably hour and a half conversation.
Would you record it?
We would record it. We're mic'd up. And we would then pass those recordings on to a writer/editor that was helping us. He would then send it back as a chapter. And 90% of it was just our conversation. And then 10% of it was him formatting it, laying it out, saying it in a way that flowed, so it didn't feel like you're reading a transcription of a conversation. And so that's the way we wrote our book. So actually, we did very little sitting in front of a computer writing ourselves. It was more of us talking about the topics and saying here, but in advance we said this is what we need to cover. So that was really effective. So that's one way to do it, is just sit down and have a conversation, and then have someone take those and then turn it into chapters.
Now, in today's world, you could do that and upload it to different services, completely transcribe that, and then offer that to another editor to do what he did. It might even simplify it further. Yeah,
like what we're doing right now, we could literally take this 45 minutes, give it to someone and say, give us back a blog post or a mini book about the value of writing a book.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're going to cover all those things, and we've talked about, and there's some good nuggets here. So that's one way to write a book. The way your friend did, writing blogs, and then just go back and go, oh, I've got a year's worth of blogs here that's a 120-page book.
I think that's
another way to do it.
These are one of the values of writing, creating really good content, because I think a lot of times blog posts, we've talked about content strategies before. And a lot of times, and I do a lot of that, one, because I genuinely enjoy it, and two, because I think, it helps, and a lot of products come out of it. But at the end of the day, plus it actually helps you solidify your philosophies on things, which I think is actually a really good byproduct. My point is if you just are writing, a lot of people, okay, I write a blog post and write another generic blog post because they think they just have to generate something. Taking the time to make something good, I think, gives you the nuts and bolts and the building blocks for if you ever wanted to write a book, or if you ever wanted to put together, like for us, like we'll put together paid, mini guides. So we don't have published books, but we have books, right? And they're guides on how to do things, and those come out of those blog posts.
Yeah.
And we've written, I think, 5 of those right now. A few of them are like 70 plus pages, but I think it's the value of creating really good content. And what's cool about it is it's funny that you mentioned, like, that's how you wrote your first book. probably my secret to at least what works for me in writing really good articles, blog posts, and those kind of things is an interview. And I sit down with a content editor once every month, and I work on outlines inside of a topic, which are prior to that meeting inside of a strategy. Like, hey, we want to talk about these things this year. There are these series of things that we're going to do. And then, so I work on an outline, and then I literally have a conversation. We record it, we videotape it, and then it goes off to writers, and then the actual post comes out of it. So it's very similar to I guess how you've written that first book.
So most of the people that I know personally that have written books, they have an editor that is engaged at ground zero with them. They're not at the start, I should say. They typically, I haven't seen somebody who's written a book, got it, I mean, I do see that from time to time, working with a client right now that's writing a book, and she seems to be doing 90% of it, but then passing the more finished piece off to an editor versus having somebody kind of co-writing it with you while you're kind of trying to get the ideas and thoughts down, right? And they're just kind of finishing and refining. Is that something that you think that it's a good route to go? You find somebody that is working with you from the start that can do that? Because that sounds like, to me, that what you just mentioned, where you just sit down and unpack it, that sounds like a doable thing.
Yeah.
Like, I can talk my ears off. I can talk anybody's ears off, right?
Brad, you've got like 3 books right now.
I know.
Just in this episode.
Exactly. And so that seems to me doable. Like, yeah, I could probably do that. I don't know if it'd be good.
Well, you're a really good teacher, and when you do Zoom explanations of things, whether it's in your little crypto side thing, or I know he's explained some things for you.
Brad is the wealth
I should
of
teach
teaching knowledge inside of Brad.
Or do you think I would? I don't know. It's hard to see yourself, but I feel like I want to teach someday because I have a lot to say, but I don't know if I'd be good at it.
You would be excellent at it.
Really?
And my point is do that, and then let someone take that content and put it into a book. Because I think what I'm hearing from you is you can talk, you can teach, you find that easy, but the thought of putting it into written form is overwhelming.
To sit down
so remove that. Remove that. Let someone else do it.
So when you start, do you, like, for me, okay, so I'm thinking like, okay, what would I do if I wrote a book? First thing I would do is probably feel a passion towards writing something in a certain I have something to say that hasn't been said before, that I need people to probably be beneficial for people. That's what would happen in my mind. I would have this something I would think about, and it couldn't get out of my head for weeks or months. So I know that it's important. Then I would probably start to write down what the uniqueness is, what I think my unique take on that would be, what I think would be really valuable. Maybe compare that to other pieces out there to say, hey, this is unique. It is unique. I haven't seen anything like it. And then I would probably go, how do I position the book so that just by the title alone would be unique and think in the space it would sound unique. I might even do stupid things like go find out how many people are Google certain things so that I know even the people things are Googling, right? It's not stupid, but like more marketing related things to kind of hone in on the title and stuff in the genre. And then from there, I could talk about those topics with somebody else maybe, so they can help me unpack it. Someone who knows a little bit about it, that's close to it, but yet could help bounce off ideas and then send that over to an editor to unpack into a chapter or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
That could be one way to do it.
Yeah, that's it. You got it. You got it. That's
All
one
right.
way to do it.
That's one way.
I think getting your thoughts and your whatever they may be, whatever you want to communicate to the world about for whatever reason, is as simple as hiring a ghostwriter and letting someone else write it with your input. What you're talking about now, what we're talking about is talking about it, recording it, getting it out in spoken form, and then let someone editing it together, to sitting down and spending the next 4 months in front of a computer every day for hours writing it out. Everybody has different strategies, and then there's many more besides that. And so there's no there's no right way or wrong way. It's just, I think the number one most important thing is make sure it's authentically yours and it comes from your heart and your personality. And it's something that you truly, really, really believe in. People can smell and feel when it's not. And I think that's the challenge to be a good writer and to write a good book is it truly, truly coming from you, with your DNA on it, with your angle, with your own experience versus you're just rehashing somebody else's stuff. That's to me, that's the magic of it. And even if it's boring or uninteresting to most people, if it's genuinely you, you're going to connect with someone because that's where connection happens.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you,
Yeah.
if you were to do a book, having a ghostwriter, editor alongside of you, not including your time, let's just say you do a book by yourself, what do you think a cost could be? I mean, I know it could be probably. What kind of cost would it be, you think, to do,
what kind of, how expensive is it to
self-publish
write,
it, like even
write
through
the thing?
Amazon
Yeah.
self-publishing kind of thing where they do on demand, selling it through like an Amazon platform? Like what do you think the financial investment would be outside of your time, in no marketing dollars toward it, just to get the book out and available for people to purchase?
I know it's a lame answer, but it's all over the board, depending on the quality and
$10,000
expense of an editor to how much time to, it could be as cheap as.
Like if you're telling me, I mean, the process I just told you, like if you said, hey, that's your process, that you might be able to get a book done with $10,000.
I would say $5,000 to $10,000 would be like a good
designer, good layout
designer,
person.
and a good editor.
Yeah,
like
editor.
you could find between $5,000 and $10,000. That would give you plenty of money in today's economy.
Okay.
Now you could, if you want a good ghostwriter to write the book and they have experience, it probably cost you 15 to 20.
Yeah.
But if you want to do almost everything yourself and then hire a decent editor to make sure you got no mistakes, no grammatical errors, it makes sense, it's laid out properly. I mean, it could be as cheap as a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
So it literally is all over the board, depending on how much heavy lifting you want to do and how much you want to outsource, just like anything else.
I've heard, it's not arbitrarily expensive. I'm sorry, it's prohibitively, especially if it's a business strategy. It's definitely worth doing. It's funny though. I've heard, really sort of famous, kind of successful authors in certain niches that have offered ghostwriting services to people who don't want to compete with that person. And I think the one guy, I just happened to kind of come across this. I think he's charging $1 million. For the book writing service.
Yeah, ghostwriters who.
But that's for someone who's written a successful
big hits.
Big hits. They can and there's a couple of those agencies here in town that do that. They ghostwrite for others, and you'd be surprised at how many books are on New York Times bestseller list and people that you know and respect. They didn't write their book at all. It's ghostwritten. Now that doesn't mean it didn't come from their input and insights and life, but they, like you said, they paid someone anywhere from $30,000 to $1 million.
And I know that's completely honest, and there's nothing wrong with it. But there's something like, if you're going to write a book, there's something that says like, you should write that.
Yeah,
like the core,
I
the
agree.
soul of the book should be you, because it'll probably be more effective. And you'll be more genuine in talking about it. You'll be more convicted about it. But
yeah, you don't want to be up on stage and
like,
people
I wrote that.
interview you and quiz you, and you're like, I don't remember.
Sure, yes, I choose not to say. Okay,
You have a little thing in your ear, and your ghostwriter's in the back telling you what to say.
Title first or title last?
That's a great question.
Ooh.
I think it has to evolve over time. I usually like to wait till the end because
I know you have some ideas at the beginning.
Yeah,
That's
you
like
have
what-
you have ideas
You
like
have a working title?
this is a working title. This is what I want to write about, and I think this would be a great title. But then you're in the middle of it, and you're like, "Oh, that's
'cause
better."
Something
because-
pops in your head because I have this list too, but I know you're like this. You'll have book titles pop into your head, and you're like, "Oh, that's a really good book title. I don't have a book for it."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you find like maybe the content takes a different direction, and so the title no longer. It's too limiting, or it doesn't accurately reflect the totality of the work when you're done with it. So yeah, I would say wait toward the end to definitely nail that down.
Publisher or no publisher?
I'm a big believer in self-publishing. I mean, if that's important to you, you can spend the time. But here's the thing: the life cycle, of the schedule of a publisher is. You shop it around, so you're going to take months to a year to shop it around. Once they
What do you need to shop around? We live in a
manuscript.
publishing town,
Yeah.
So we've all worked with publishers, but like
You send your manuscript.
you need a manuscript,
yeah, or at least the
so
first
you
few
basically
chapters.
need to, just so everyone's clear, you need to write it first, basically.
At least the first few
essentially.
chapters and the outline and a chapter.
If you're well
headings.
known, you might be able to get away with like an idea,
Maybe.
But if you're not,
And
yeah.
being that you've had multiple books in the past is probably maybe easier to get a publisher if,
Yeah, for sure. Sure, but just again, let me give you my my I guess sarcastic response.
Yeah, I like to hear sarcasm. Let's
Yeah. The problem with publishers is this. You've got, so you spend 6 months to a year shopping it around, okay? After you've already written part of the book, if not all of it. Then once you get them to accept it, if they do, they might give you a little advance, which they don't give as much as they used to, which is nice, okay? Then they're going to go, okay, this book will be out in a year from now or 9 months from now. So you got to count on at least 2.5 years minimum by the time you write your book to the time it's published. I don't have time for that, and I don't have the patience for it.
A lot of the content is old too at that point.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, they're going to take most of the income, and they're going to give you a small little piece. Yeah. So at the end, they're not marketers. They're publishers. Their goal is to throw enough books against the wall and see if something sticks, and they're going to prioritize the ones that are already working. So to me, it's like we live in a world where if you can find a good designer, anybody can get on Amazon, and we're marketers. So what do I need a publisher for again?
exactly.
What would be a good reason? Because obviously people do use publishers, and some really big books are through publishers. What would be a good reason to go to a publisher?
It's certainly there's cachet, right? If you can get on a big label and they can believe in you and they get behind it, they'll get you some bigger interviews out of the gate.
Yeah.
Right. But, you go look at some numbers in Google. How many books are published? These big publishers publish hundreds and hundreds a year.
Yeah.
And you have only heard of maybe 2 or 3 out of that publisher in a year,
Yeah, I've heard that if you get a publisher, and I don't know anything about this world that much, but it's really the first book, you're not going to make any money. You're just hoping to get some recognition, right? Even if the book does well, you're just going to get recognition. You're not, again, the publisher is going to need to pay themselves back, and you never see any much profit. But the second book, then, if the first one does really well, the second book is where authors typically see the benefit of the publisher.
Yeah. Or self-publish, make a splash. Then on your second book, walk it into a publisher and say, hey, I've already done this. I've got this following. I've sold this many books.
You got some more leverage.
You have more leverage. So again, I'm a little bit,
That's not
cynical.
Cynical. I think that's just like an insider's perspective, because most people don't have, like, this is a publishing town. You've worked a lot with publishers for many, many years. You know how they work. There's goods and bads. And I think for someone who's never worked inside of that may not know the difference.
If you don't know a marketing person, you don't want to do that, and you just want to write books and speak, then go get a publisher, maybe a small publisher to start with. But if you've got any marketing chops, any know-how, any drive to get the word out, I would say now is the best time in the world. Go to Lightning Source or Kindle, KDP, they're print on demand. That's what we did with our book. You don't have to inventory books. You don't have to have books in your garage. It's no cost. You just upload it, and then when someone orders it, they're like, "Oh, this is a beautiful book." They don't know that it was just printed, print on demand.
Yeah.
So it's real time delivery, real time printing, and delivery within 2 days.
Now, is this your first book by your co-author, or is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
cool.
she's written some other little things, but
Yeah.
for all
First
intents and
book.
purposes,
Right.
this is her first book as well.
Awesome.
Wow.
Good discussion, guys.
Any
Yeah,
last
thanks for-
notes on for us newbies of?
I would say do it. Do it. There's only ups and no downs. Literally, there's nothing negative. If anything, it's a great exercise to get your words out, to get your thoughts out, and like you said, to document it. And there's only upsides to it.
One last thing. So how do you make sure when you write, especially when you're writing practical books, like here's how you do this and this, how do you make sure you're not writing anything that's copywritten or someone else's stuff or strategy or whatever? Like, is there a
Plagiarism. How do you get get around that when you think your idea is original, but somehow you've
is there any sort of like service or anything
There
that
is.
that will read it and be like, okay, you're good, check mark, or no, this area right here.
There's tools for plagiarism checkers. You can do that right now. You can upload anything, and there's several plagiarism checker tools online. You just copy and paste the text in, and it'll say this is all clear, or actually these sentences are problematic, and it'll show you. I think most people know intuitively if they're going to start saying things or quoting things, you've got to make sure you have citations and documentation, and that's where a good editor will come in. An editor that has that experience, they'll read and go, hey, this whole section here I think might be worth putting a footnote to because of whatever. So that's the value, getting other eyes on it.
Good.
So where can listeners find your recent book?
Oh, they can go to Amazon. It's called Our Digital Soul, Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Toward Recovery. You can just Google my name or Jenny Black, my co-author, or just Our Digital Soul.
Yes.
Awesome.
Sweet. Thanks for sharing today.
Yeah,
thank
this
you.
has been awesome.
This
Super
has been
helpful.
fun. I
Thanks for the
love this
tips.
little series.
Yes.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.